Hello, Hugh.
Hi, Greg. How you doing today?
Oh, it's been a pretty good day. Made a video earlier at the park, and I noticed you're in outer space today, which is a fitting scene because, after all, you and your mother did know Star Trek writer Harv Bennett, so I think the theme fits pretty good for you.
Yeah, her best
Uh,
friend was the Mayhew family, Fran Mayhew and her brothers, and they were Wookiee on Star Wars too. Uh, the Mayhew family was at my mother, Miss Harris's funeral. Funeral. Um,
yeah, isn't that interesting on Star Trek how they had Hugh of Borg and Harv Bennett, the writer for Star Trek, liked to show up and eat dinner with your mother.
yeah, Bennett and Mayhew. They'd come over for holidays and have dinner with my family, and just during the week. Yeah, well, my mother was Harris in the Fuller family, and we owned Fuller Transmissions and Borg Warner, and I went to Gordon J. Warner. So you had Hugh of Borg from.
So we had Fuller washing machines, and they made transmissions for washing machines, and washing machines are cubes, and Borg Warner there. So you had Hugh of Borg, which was a cube like the washing machines.
Yeah,
It's amazing
they
how
were
they put this
marking me.
together.
They were my mother's friends were marking me from birth. She's the real Harris family, not the fake Biden and Kamala Harris. They're stealing my name uh, so they can get elected as president after murdering my wives. It's real interesting that Obama's White House, Biden and Clinton and Obama with CBS murdered my wives on the Manning Ranch and gave the world Bradley Manning. And now the slave trade family, Kamala Harris, is using my family's name to get elected. And her real
Yeah,
name,
and see, we're not pulling out of our rear ends either when we say she's a slave trading family, because her own dad wrote a book, and right there in the book, he's the one that said that his family were slave traders.
correct. And the Harris family, who was with Lincoln when they murdered him, uh, was fighting against slavery and then the Civil War, and that's why they were Lincoln's friend to begin with, is because they were against slavery and they didn't like blacks in the country, and they knew the majority of the blacks were coming from black families who were raiding their own villages and selling their own relatives and parents as slaves for money in Africa, and that's who Kamala Harris really is. And she's not the Harris family born and raised in America. And it's interesting to note she's a lawyer in the entire California Lawyers Bar, stole my trademark back in the 60s and used it to pass the bar exam. That was the study booklet for the lawyers to use to pass the bar exam. So every attorney, lawyer, and judge and Supreme Court justice in the country studied out of my to pass the bar exam out of my stolen trademark.
So now Kamala Harris's husband, whose last name is actually Imhoff, and she refused to take his name so that she could use the Harris name to run for president. And it's interesting that Mr. Imhoff, Harris's husband, is an attorney for entertainers out of California who also stole and used that trademark to become an attorney.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. Her husband is M. Hoffa, and it's interesting to note that I was detained for Hoffa's disappearance because my mother was with Jimmy Hoffa at the Mock of Sly Fox. Louise.
Yeah, your mother-in-law was with him, and she was interviewed for the murder of Jimmy Hoffa. And some of the people that you worked with were interviewed or wrote books, made books about the murder of Jimmy Hoffa. But somehow they never got around to talking to you about Hoffa. And here we have M. Hoff over here, who's Kamala Harris's husband.
Yeah, it's very funny. They interviewed everybody and they made books and movies about everybody except me, and I'm the guy that was in his union and driving a truck, and the FBI detained me before they detained Chucky O'Brien. And I grew up with the O'Brien family and Roseanne Barr. They lived in my Oakland County neighborhood. and they hid my own kidnapping and the murders of children.
Yeah, you were friends with Dr. O'Brien, and then Dr. O'Brien's kid, Kathy O'Brien, hung out with Roseanne Barr. And Kathy O'Brien is the one, and Roseanne Barr together are the ones that said they were the MK Ultra victims, which were covering up all the real murdered kids and all the people who really did face the trauma there in Oakland County that you saw in real life. So they'll talk about and they'll interview and they'll make books about the fake people that Roseanne Barr's, but they'll ignore what really happened, which is connected to the police. And the police is why we're here tonight and what we're really here to talk about tonight. Because at the same time Jimmy Hoffa was killed, there was something very interesting about the police that was going out killing people, and that was in the news today. At the same time.
It went back even farther than that. That was in '57 when I myself was kidnapped and my own twin was murdered. His body was dumped in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And that's no coincidence. Right. My wife, Victoria, was murdered, and she was born right there at the Mars Candy Factory, and that's Victoria Mars. And then Jim Mars was murdered as he started to write my book. And all the billionaires in the country, all of them know me. They've all marked me and they've all hidden me. And I could go through state by state and name them, like the Koch brothers and Bloomberg, and show how their entertainment industry that made them billionaires marked me and hid my truth of Kennedy's murder and his 5 brothers and nephew. And
it's no coincidence there that Roseanne Barr was hiding your truth all the way back then. And now we have Emily Barr, who runs Senator Graham's Graham Media, that's WJR Radio, and we have Attorney General Barr in the White House. All these people are related and connected in one way or another.
No, none of that's coincidence, and it all goes back to Billy Graham. And I own Baker College on Hughes Street, and the story we're going to tell tonight about my being hidden by other groups, it's all related. Peter Graham was Graham Trucking when the world got Billy Graham, and he was the largest trucking company in Michigan. And my family, the Fuller family, was putting transmissions, the Fuller transmission, in every semi on earth at that time. And we made them in Battle Creek, Michigan. That's my family, the Fuller family. And Fuller family married the Harris family, who was with Lincoln when he was murdered by the actor Booth.
And isn't it interesting there that Graham's media group that has Emily Barr as the CEO, and we have Attorney General Barr, well, that's also, they have the Osbournes on that radio station there in Detroit. And running the sex crimes division is Mike and Gina Osbourne. And then we have the FBI, and then we have the Osbournes were the ones that were the kidnappers and the rapists connected to the police and the former governor of Michigan, Chase Osborne, right there in the same area. Now it makes sense how it all goes together and how they're all covering it up and how Trump must know about it because he's keeping these same people as head of the FBI even today.
All of the presidents, including Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Attorney General Barr, Bob Bolton used to work with me. We built an airplane together. All of these people, going all the way back to '63 when they murdered Kennedy, and prior to that, the Michigan government, all of them know I was kidnapped and chained to a toilet in the Governor Osborne's basement with 4 other governors' families, Long, Wallace, and then Daryl Hall, who started Daryl's TV and gave the world musicians like Joe Walsh and the Eagles and on and on and on in the rock and roll industry that my family essentially controlled. And I was a publisher with 28,000 worldwide entertainment contracts, and the government stole those contracts. And there's no lie in that. This is my federal tax coupon booklet, and you can read it, and it's addressed right to the wrong name. But on the inside, I would correct my name, and you can see it's Hugh Squire, Bottom Line Advertising and Publishing in Madison Heights, Michigan. And Madison Heights is is Oakland County, Michigan, where I was living in Hazel Park, Oakland County, Michigan, on 9 Mile in DeQuinder. And I owned Hughes Street, and that's where Baker College was built, and the high school that replaced John Fitzgerald High School in Allen Park, which was Hazel Park High School, was on the street I owned, Hughes Street. And I owned that street via my uncle and his wife, Dorothy and Butch, the day I was born.
So we had Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, which is the religious connection to the Grahams and Billy Graham. So you had Baker and the college that bought Baker College that bought the property there that your family owned there on that street. And then it's no coincidence that later on we had Judith Vari Baker, who was Oswald's girlfriend. And Oswald is the one that they set up and pretended killed Kennedy. And interestingly, Judith Vari Baker lives in South Bend, Indiana, where Peter Buttigieg from South Bend Inn, no coincidence, the gay guy that just ran for president, was from as well. All that goes together.
Yeah, so then the Cook family who gave Alex Jones my chalk drawing, the Gardner family, I'm the Gardner family, and I'm the Cook family. And Cook is Apple computers, and they stalked me all my life. And Cook actually helped murder my wife, an attorney, and on the Manning Ranch with CBS in Obama and Biden and Clinton. And these murders were covered up. And the Cook family is my family through my second wife's marriage. And I've had 4 wives murdered, but my second wife and Cook and Perry, her family members, are still alive. And it's a no-brainer to me. Her family and biker friends murdered my next 4 wives. But the police turned a blind eye to this. The chief of police in Greenville, Tennessee, told me he can't help it if Obama and Biden and Clinton are corrupt. He could do nothing about it, so he didn't make out a murder report. I had to go to Johnson City, and then that chief of police, where my wife was murdered 35 days after having her ears cut off and tortured, he told me, well, can't we just leave it up to God? And he tried to refuse to make out a murder report. And I insisted and bothered the DA for a couple of weeks, and I got a murder case open, but they're not attempting to solve the murder. And they're doing this by design because the government itself murdered my wives. Now, Cook in Indiana, you mentioned Indiana earlier, he owns all the medical supplies, and he inherited that from his mother and father, and he's the richest man in Indiana. And these people murdered my wives, and they're my relatives. Cook is my relative through marriage. And I'm going to stop right there, but there's a whole story behind that. And it's related to Tricky Dick and Gerald Ford becoming president when Spiro Agnew had to resign with Tricky Dick because of all the criminal findings in Richard Nixon's presidency. Which I
was amazed today to find out that Ford's real name, birth name, was King, and then he was adopted and he took his adopted name.
Oh, that's correct.
Such a big history with
Gerald
the King
Ford,
name too.
Yeah, and this goes on. This is all related to 9/11 and the murder of the Kennedys and my own kidnap and the murder of the Oakland County child kids. President Ford, Gerald Ford, is my family member. His mother was the Gardner family. I'm the Gardner family, and the King family, and I'm the King family. I grew up, Stephen King was my filler at Morrison, and Morrison was John Wayne, and I drove truck in Jimmy Hoffa's union when I drove for Morrison, and that's when Jimmy Hoffa disappeared and the FBI detained me for his murder. And I'm not mentioned in any book, and this goes even deeper than this, Greg. We're gonna start to show how the police and governors and the White House itself, all the presidents have covered up my truth of the people who murdered John F. Kennedy so that they could run the government and be your president. And now we
And
have
our story today is about how the police were part of this. And we've seen this over and over again when we saw Rayshard Brooks. And right after he said, and that's the bottom line, he was murdered. And you've shown that on your videos before. And then L. Brooks Patterson, there's Brooks, was the police chief.
Brooks is my family member also, Greg.
Right.
Right,
I know that.
General Flayton married General Flayton. His family married the Brooks family, and the Brooks family is my aunt, and the Flayton family is my uncle. And the media told you that General Flayton put the astronauts on the moon at NASA. And
I don't want to hit too many rabbit trails, Hugh. We'll confuse people. I want to focus a little bit on those policemen some, because the policeman especially was L. Brooks Patterson, who's the police chief of Oakland County.
Well,
he saw you right after he must have known about those rapes that were going on and those kids that were murdered right then, and even saw you as you were escaping that dungeon down in Osborne's basement.
Greg, you're missing the point that my aunt was the Brooks family. L. Brooks Patterson's nephew was Mr. Oglesby, and they found him hanging in a jail after I told them my story in Oakland County. I went to school with Oglesby. He was my friend, and Oglesby his mother was Mrs. Brooks. My aunt was Mrs. Brooks. Bobby Brooks went to Vietnam with Bob Hope. That's also the Brooks family. And then L. Brooks Patterson, his name is Brooks because of my aunt's family. Just like Gerald Ford, his mother was Gardner. They don't use the names in my family out in public, but Gerald Ford was actually the Gardner and the King family, and not the Ford family. And this relates to 9/11, because on 9/11, George Bush said my name as my uncle videotaped him, and the first plane hit the first tower. He said Hugh's structures are collapsing in a Freudian slip.
Real obvious too. If you listen to that video, it's anybody can easily tell that he said Hugh's structures are collapsing, and then he corrected himself and said Hugh's.
And then he went on to blame my friend who owned the video stores, who worked with the Ford family, who is actually my family, and my family ran Dearborn Mansion. And this is related to 9/11. Ford, he said that Ford and Ronnie, who owned the video stores, paid non-existent Muslims to give the Voss family, who are my friends in Key West, training to these Muslims to crash planes into the Pentagon in 9/11. And that's directly related to Gerald Ford, who is my family. And the Cook drawing, Cook is my family, Gardner is my family. And these billionaires all over the country, they instigated these things like 9/11 with Israel, France, Germany, and England, so that they could become billionaires. And I'm living proof of this. And I've overcome hits on my life dozens of times. And I have a hit out on my life right now. I was warned, and I made you aware of that the other day. I showed you the people trying to get me to pay them protection in the mafia, if you remember.
Sure.
And I don't.
Well, hiding behind religion to do it.
I'm not afraid, and I don't pay anybody for protection. And I'm going to keep saying my truth until I die, because I'm the truth of your president's murder, his brother's murders, and the Oakland County child killer, and Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance. And 4 of my wives have been murdered in 35 years. So I'm not about to shut up, and nobody on this earth scares me.
Just to do a little connection with the Gardner family, because people don't understand just how important that family is. That's actress Ava Gardner. That's Bill Gates' father's wife, Mimi Gardner. That's the same family.
This is Bill Gates' father. And then at my wedding, my father-in-law, Joe Jacobs, gave Gates the software to make his first computer. Joe Jacobs of IBM. As I married his daughter, Nancy, and Nancy's current father at that time was Joe Jacobs. Her father before that was mayor of East Detroit, where Ted Nugent grew up. Ted
And
Nugent.
that's the Motley Fool too that I wanted to say, that was the Gardner family too.
That's
So if you get your
correct.
stock tips, you're getting it from the Gardner family.
That's correct. Gardner runs the Motley Fool, and the government is hiding me behind all of these things by not saying the real names of people like Gerald Ford. Then we have this went on to Ruby Ridge. There's the FBI and the WWE wrestler at Ruby Ridge, and I really know him. This is my photograph. He lives a few
That's
blocks.
Rico there, huh?
And
Rico Valentino.
He murdered my family, the Harris family. He murdered a little kid and put the Harris family in jail, protecting gay bars that had kidnapped me when I was 4 years old and used me for sex and porno movies. And that's where Snowden comes in too. And there's rabbit trails all over the place because they're hiding my truth of who really murdered the Kennedys. Now, go ahead, and you have the article there from the Policeman, and directly related to my life and Al Brooks Patterson hiding my kidnap back in Oakland County. And this policeman was a policeman in California.
Right. So here we're talking about a killer and I think he was doing his killings in the 70s. It says here, right around the time Jimmy Hoffa disappeared, and it's amazing how this fits in with your whole story here. And this was in the news today.
D'Angelo, and D'Angelo's Pizzeria was on Hughes Street, the street that I owned.
Right.
Next to Baker.
Let's read the story and then we'll tie it in so it makes more sense to everybody. Golden State Killer victims address him in court. The devil can keep you company. Survivors of Joseph D'Angelo, the man now known as the Golden State Killer, addressed him directly in court on Tuesday in a powerful and emotional victim impact statement. The 3 days of hearings, which include statements from survivors and victims' families, began Tuesday with victims of rapes in Sacramento County. D'Angelo, who was a police officer from 73 to 79, and there's right in the middle of that, 76 is when Hoffa disappeared, will be formally sentenced on Friday to life without parole. One woman who was 22 years old, newlywed, when she was raped in May of 77, told D'Angelo in court Tuesday, "I forgive you." I can skip that paragraph. The daughters of rape survivor Patricia Murphy read a statement on her mother's behalf on Tuesday.
Greg Bowe Murphy was my dispatcher, and I'm Huey. I went to church with Disney, and he made me the goose that laid the golden egg, baby Huey. And this is the Golden State Killer who lived. His pizzeria was on the street I owned when 5 governors kidnapped me back in 1957, and they murdered kids around me all the way up until 76 when the FBI detained me for Jimmy Hoffa's murder. Here's the D'Angelo family in California, where they used my stolen trademark, and Kamala Harris studied out of it to pass the bar exam. And every attorney in the country knows it's my stolen trademark because attorneys stole it in New York and put up bar.
This whole thing is what. This is the story that that Alex Jones used to invent the Pizzagate story. This is the origin of all that.
Well,
we'll see if we can tie it together for everybody.
I don't think Alex Jones created the Pizzagate story. I think that was QAnon.
Okay, QAnon started
QAnon.
Right.
I owned the Q-Bert game at the Gaming Commission in Vegas. Frank Sinatra, was my uncle, and Gates is one of my family members. And I owned the Q-Bert game at the Gaming Commission through the Wood family, Natalie Wood's family. And they would
why you have Q on Star Trek, right?
Yeah, well, they made me anonymous, and then they gave you my after they murdered Kennedy, they gave you Tricky Dick, and they were using me in porno movies at 4. You get Tricky Dick, and then he gives you my family member, Gerald Ford, who is really the Gardner and Harris family and the King family, who are all my relatives. Now, this policeman and these murders are all related to my life, just like the.
Hold on. Let's finish reading it so they know what murders we're talking about.
Patricia Murphy, Charles Murphy was my dispatcher when I worked for John Wayne and Jimmy Hoffa. Go
All
on.
right, let me keep going. The daughter of rape survivor Patricia Murphy read a statement on her mother's behalf on Tuesday as D'Angelo sat silently in a white face mask and orange jail suit. On September 4 of 76, there it is, it's real close to Jimmy Hoffa's
Jimmy
murder.
Hoffa. And this is when the FBI detained me in my own driveway after leaving Charles Murphy.
Right. So obvious right here. So on September 4, 76, Murphy, a 29-year-old single mother, was attacked outside her parents' house. That night forever changed me, the statement said. I never felt safe for many years. It was hard for me to trust. I always looked over my shoulder expecting someone to jump out at me. I wonder why he picked me to be one of his rape victims. Did he know my name, she said. He punched me in the face and broke my nose. I had a concussion from falling backward. It soon became clear that he and his knife had complete control over me for the next 2 hours. This story's going to sound very familiar here in a minute with Miss Miller. The lump on my nose from the punch never went away, her statement said. I learned to accept it was just part of my face. Murphy later turned to alcohol and drugs to numb my pain, she said. Murphy, still suffering from PTSD, was hospitalized for several days. After D'Angelo's arrest, she had trouble sleeping and had vivid nightmares. The Golden State Killer, inside the timeline of crimes, D'Angelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder in front of dozens of victims and victims' relatives in June as part of a plea deal, which also required him to admit to multiple uncharged acts, including rapes, which were described in horrific detail by prosecutors. The death penalty was taken off the table in exchange for guilty pleas. D'Angelo will be sentenced to life without parole.
Okay, now after the FBI detained me, I had bought Miller a house, and here's Miller, who I lived with and helped her buy a house next to the tank arsenal in Warren, Michigan. The book is Angel Voices, and there's Miller on the front cover. And Miller got the knife away from D'Angelo and Osborne and stabbed one of them in the stomach and escaped them at 12. And she was raped by these people 12 years after I was. In Oakland County, she lived a street over from Hoover Street where I lived. She ran away to California at 12 and came back to Michigan at 24 in the 70s. And I helped her get a house next to the tank arsenal. And there's the book, Angel Voices. And she was a victim of D'Angelo. On Hughes,
Angel Voices and D'Angelo. It's amazing.
on Hughes,
And there she had this same story as what this girl's describing here.
President Kennedy's press secretary with his last book of he wrote 7 Days in May while he was Kennedy's press secretary. It became a movie. Just before he died, he wrote My Stolen Trademark, the bottom line, put a red line under it. That's Obama's red line in the sand. They sanded me to hide my truth of Kennedy and the Oakland County child killings. And then the FBI and Hollywood, they gave you a book and said Miller killed Hoffa. That's not truth. I bought the house Miller lived in. And Miller was the civil servant that named the streets in my neighborhood after presidents, and they planned Kennedy's murder.
Yeah, obviously, because all the streets run north and south except for two, Lincoln and Fitzgerald. They run east and west, and those streets were laid out before John Fitzgerald Kennedy was murdered.
And Miller was the civil servant at the college who named the streets in Oakland County. I'm not a theory. I've lived these things.
Cook, yeah, I mean, you're not making any of this. This is stuff you've seen happen. This isn't something you're theorizing in your head. This is all stuff you've seen and people you know.
Cook is the richest man in Indiana. Cook is my relative. And back at that time, when just before or just after they stole Bottom Line, there was a song, a real famous rock song called Indiana Wants Me. And it was aimed directly at me as they stole my birth name and trademark. And I bought Miller a house. And then they hid the fact that the FBI detained me in my own driveway and my mother was with Jimmy Hoffa as he disappeared. And all of this is government murders. And they dumped the bodies on my properties or the streets named after my families for 7 decades, Greg. Women and children. They murdered 4 of my wives. The government has murdered 4 of my wives. So Kamala Harris and Joe Biden can be your president.
Yeah, absolutely. And you even get death threats from somebody named Joe that seems to be covering for,
yeah, and I have,
or seems to be code for Joe Biden.
I have every billionaire in the country knows me, and people like Bloomberg, who runs entertainment, and Harris's husband, M. Hoff. Well, I was married to Mary Westhouse. Cook is her family member. Perry is her family member. As they murdered Jimmy Hoffa, and I was detained in my driveway as I was married to Mary Westhouse. M. Hoff. This is not coincidence. This is no more coincidence than I got hit over the head with a sledgehammer and the world got MC Hammer the next day. None of this is coincidence. And then the police murdered my family members, Brooks and Taylor, and all these black people who were my relatives' slave families back in the 1700s. Now, Kamala Harris, her family sold slaves to America, and she's not my family. She's a black woman.
Right.
Her family are the black people who turned their own villages in for money. And these are evil people, and you don't want them in your White House. Why did we fight a civil war? Was to get rid of these people. You don't want to vote them back into your White House. And this video needs to go viral, but none of our videos ever do. And you're well aware, I'm telling truth about Ruby Ridge. They stole my name and killed a little kid to protect the very gay governors who had kidnapped me and murdered little kids and threw them on my properties for 20 years. The FBI, Osborne at the FBI gave this guy 250 grand to kill an 11-year-old boy. And
it's amazing how much they keep using wrestlers in all of these events. That's why you have, well, dang it, all of a sudden his name just left me. The guy that keeps saying, and that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold Steve Austin said so, yeah. So he stole the bottom line trademark, and there you were showing Rico Valentino.
When Hoppa disappeared, Austin was the Austin Steel Company, and my wife's father worked for the Austin Steel Company, and he was also a state policeman. And that state policeman, her father, for no reason at all, took a shot at me because I was standing over a hole. He and a bunch of bikers and the president of a biker club had dug to bury Jimmy Hoffa the night before.
It's amazing also that the DuPont company helped create the wrestlers in the WWF, WWE. And right here in our hometown here in Belpre is where we have the big DuPont plant that was featured in the Dark Waters movie. And it's also the same town that we had a wrestling movie, Wrestlers versus Zombies. None of that's coincidence. It all goes together so well.
Now, again, that takes you back to John Burns. And I was playing music with the musicians who backed up Wayne Newton and Bobby Darin. And Bobby Fuller, I fought the law and the law won. That's my family. And Bobby J was a saxophone player I played drums with in Michigan back before Jimmy Hoffa disappeared. And the other musician was John Burns in Detroit. And John Burns was at Sohio refineries when I drove tanker trucks into Sohio for the Webb Company. I saw John Burns every day of my life, and he was a Detroit policeman. Nowadays, Billy Squire, his real name is Craig, and the chief of police in Detroit right now is Mr. Craig. And you just mentioned Steve Austin, and the mayor of Detroit is Jim Duggan. These are
like Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
This is the very people who stole my trademark, my birth name, to hide my Truth of Kennedy's murder, and they're still running the streets of Detroit.
And that right there, people don't understand the connection. That right there is why, the exact reason why Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage could say in 1989 that they were going to fight the Twin Towers, the other tag team, and the Twin Towers would come crumbling down, they said. Yeah, that's right there on the, you can find that on YouTube real easy.
And then the chief of police, Mr. Craig in Detroit, and the Craig family stole my name, Squire. And now Kamala Harris is the same black families who are slave families. She's stealing my mother's name and they're doing this to be elected and continually hide my truth of who really murdered the Kennedys, who the real Oakland County child killers were, who disappeared Hoffa, and they murdered dozens and dozens of kids in my life for 7 decades, and they're still doing it today, and nobody listens to me. These videos I've been making should have been viral 50 years ago, but nobody listens to truth.
If people cared enough about the truth to listen to what you're saying, there would be a lot of kids that don't have to go through this right now. Something could have been done about it.
That's correct. They're still killing kids, and they use them in the porno industry, and then they cover up the murders right at the White House. I'm covered up at the White House by the Barr family and Senator Graham. Senator Graham and the Barr family have hidden me for 7 decades, and they know I'm the truth of Kennedy's killers.
Yeah, by literally hiring the Osbournes. Trump hires the Osbournes to run the sex crimes division of the FBI. Senator Graham hires the Osbournes in his radio station.
Greg Bowe, Trump didn't hire the Osbournes. They were.
Well, he may not have hired him, but
they were there during Obama's administration when Obama and Biden and Clinton murdered 2 of my wives. As Garrett at CBS sent me Clinton's emails and computers from the FBI offices to the Manning Ranch where they murdered my wives.
Right. Yeah, they've been allowed to stay, but yeah, right.
These murders are covered up in all news because senators own the media, and people like Roseanne Barr run it, and Osborne, they run the media, and those are the very families that kidnapped me and killed little kids. And then they claim that they're MK Ultra, which is a big can of baloney, just like the Cook and Gardner drawing on 9/11. It's all baloney, Greg, to hide my truth of who really murdered your president. And they made me anonymous with Pizzagate and QAnon and Alex Jones and Julian Assange and Snowden. This is how, and Bradley Manning. This is how they hide my story as they murder my family.
Yeah.
So, did you have any other questions, Greg?
Well, we covered a lot of ground pretty fast. I think if there is even one reasonable person who'll say, wow, I really need to look into this. We've already given them a homework assignment, from here to the moon. They're going to spend forever researching this. It's my hope that people will. This is what I do when I want to learn something, Hugh. I listen to what you're saying or what anybody's saying that I want to learn, and I go back and I rewind. I stop, I pause, I make notes, I go back, I ask questions, and I talk to the people that made the videos. And I'm hoping that there will be a few people who are smart enough to do that here today. They'll go back, they'll make notes, they'll listen, they'll stop, record, rewind, and then contact us and ask questions so that they can really understand this story, so that they can get to the bottom of what's really going on in the world. And only then can they really make changes. The
reason they all have a hard time understanding my truth, and I'm 100 years of history in this country.
More than that.
They murdered Admiral Byrd on the day I was kidnapped at 4. They murdered my twin. They cut my father's hand off. That was Pratt and Behringer. You got the Pratt and Behringer Museum in California where Kamala Harris studied out of my stolen trademark with Emhoff. And all of this, it's just unbelievable real history that they don't report because the government runs the media. All of America, Obama,
including Alex Jones and QAnon.
All the truthers are liars. Jesse Ventura is lying to hide me. Alex Jones has been lying to hide me. Tim McVeigh, Oklahoma bombing, he lived next door to me for 20 years with John Nichols. The Nichols family still lives next door to me right now with the Chapman family, and Chapman murdered John Lennon at the Dakota. I'm living with Lakota Indians from Dakota right now, as Nichols and Chapman live next door to me, and they moved in behind me after my wife was murdered. And I have hits out on my life right now, Greg, and I'm not afraid, and I'm going to keep saying truth. I'm the real history of your country, and your country's being taken over by the families of slave traders right now. Joe Biden just got $32.3 million in 24 hours after he appointed Kamala Harris. You think that might have come from the slave trading families, Greg?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then they're using my name once again to get into the White House. The Harris family made steam thrashers. We owned Massey Ferguson. My little brother is married to the Massey family. All my nieces and
Yeah.
nephews are Massey Ferguson.
And Kamala Harris's mom has that Sri Lankan from India Asian connection, which connects her a little bit to that Chinese culture, whereas Joe Biden's son just got $1.5 billion from China.
That's correct. They're getting payola through Swiss banks, and they want to get back into the White House so they can get more payola from China and Russia, the Ukraine. That's absolutely correct, Greg, and I've watched them do it all my life. And the police have been covering up my truth for 7 decades as they murder kids and women. And they murdered 2 million innocent Muslims on 9/11 to hide my truth from America. And let's end it there. This whole video is historic, Greg. And you know
Yeah.
it.
Oh, yeah. This is one for the history books. This is something that should not only spread viral, but it should change the world if people would do their part, study it, learn it, and share it. Because we're not making any money off this. We're not asking for donations or anything. We
There's no
just want people to
hiding,
get
Greg.
serious about the truth and
There's no
tell it.
hiding my truth. I have federal documents. I have letters from every senator in the country. My family are the presidents of the past who made America. And your country is being taken over by foreign interests coming out of Kenya, which is the Queen's former possession, coming out of India, Sri Lanka, but I think she's actually a Pakistani woman. I'm tired of this. And Biden, his White House murdered, they dismembered and murdered Victoria from Pennsylvania, where the Mars Company is located, the richest person in Philadelphia. They dismembered her and they cut her ears off, slit her throat, and sodomized her over a 35-day period in Johnson City, Tennessee. And then they covered up the murder. And this murder was 7 years after they murdered Terry Heath, who is the Sarah Heath Palin family, who ran against them with John McCain. I'm tired of the lies at the White House. I'm tired of the lies from all the presidents since they murdered the Kennedy family. And I'm the truth of all of this. And the police are hiding it. Anybody can look into this, and anybody can ask me questions. And if you had any news media on earth that was truthful, they'd come right here and they'd take pictures of my federal documents and letters from senators like Graham prior to 9/11.
There should be a line down the street of news reporters who want to see, document, and display this evidence. That tells you just how corrupt the media is, because there hasn't been a single one do that.
No, instead, CBS destroyed my business on the Manning Ranch as they murdered my wife and attorney. And then there wasn't even an obituary for the girl that created the Head Start program for Ronald Reagan before he was president. The Heath family, and that's Sarah Heath Palin and John McCain. I'm tired of the lies in the media. The media is controlled by the Senate, the very Senate that murdered the Kennedys, the very Senate that takes over the White House so they can print your money and give themselves billions of dollars while they give you chump change because of a man-created virus that they want to blame on bats or a mine in China. And I know a better story. That's truth. This is terrible what they're doing to America. America no longer exists. You're being taken over by the families of slave traders. And if they killed my wives, I'm Thomas Jefferson is my ancestor. Jackson on your 20 is my ancestor. Lincoln and Grant and Chase are my ancestors. They murdered 4 of my wives, dismembered, raped, and murdered 4 of my wives, and not an obituary for any of them. And they're covering up my truth. If they did it to me, wait until the slave traders get in the White House. What do you think they're going to do to you, America? I'm going to end this here, Greg. I'm getting very mad. It's hard not to cuss them. So I don't want to swear or cuss, because this is real history, and this video needs to be in the Smithsonian. You take care,
Absolutely,
Greg.
should be.
You take care, Greg, and I know I'm making you get behind on your book doing these videos, but these videos need to be out here. You have a slave trader trying to take over the White House, and they murder people. And the money they get, the money that's being sent to them, it comes from the families backing her, slave traders from foreign nations. And if you don't believe me, look into it. You better start looking into it, because America, you don't exist no more. Thomas Jefferson is my ancestor through the Portwood family, and he wrote the Declaration of Independence long before any of us were born, and they've trashed it and they've murdered my wives, and he's my great grandfather. You need to look into what I'm saying, America, and you need to do it real fast. Bye, Greg. You have anything else to say?
No, I think we hit it real good.
Take care.
We'll go ahead and end it there.
Take care.
See you later.